Yes, we are live.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. SNC Annual General Meeting, April 21st, 2022. It's so nice to see most of you here in the gallery, but before we move forward, we have traditional land acknowledgement and Rhonda's going to do that for us.
Kwe, Sego, good morning. As we gather here today on what is known as Turtle Island by Aboriginal peoples of America, North America, now called Canada, we recognize and deeply appreciate the relationship, past and present, that the Indigenous nations have with lands and waters. We acknowledge that the Indigenous practices of land stewardship have created the clean waters, healthy forests, meadows, and wetlands that benefit and enrich lives of all Canadians. As we share stewards of Ontario's land and water resources, along with our First Nation partners, our Conservation Authority appreciates and respects the history and diversity of the land and its people, and are grateful to have the opportunity to meet and work in this territory. As we work towards reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people, also known as the Anishinaabe people. We would like to acknowledge that this is also the traditional and treaty lands of the Haudenosaunee people, and would also acknowledge other First Nations, Métis, Inuit peoples in Canada. In the spirit of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, under which many of our lands operate, we recognize our own responsibility to protect and steward the environment for future generations. We also recognize and affirm our responsibility to uphold the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission through our work. Miigwech, Niuwa, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhonda, and good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see so many smiling faces and happy faces this morning in Finch. I see I'd like to welcome Councillor Gilby. That's your first time probably here in SNC Finch face to face. So welcome to our board meeting. Dana, that's the first time I've probably seen you, and good to see you here also. And I want to thank all our board members that have been serving with us, with me as a chair since September. Of the 2020. So I want to thank everyone for their collaboration and working hard. I know we worked through hard and tough time. We went through lots of, with COVID, we're shutting down and opening, and of course, of increasing our business was almost double. But with the energy that we have in our organization and we have our management under the leadership of Angela and her team, our staff did an amazing job, not only by adapting to COVID business, but also to be pushing all these applications and review applications one after one. And we noticed the workload, how hard it was. But with all these challenges we face and challenges that we've done in our organization, I want to thank the board member and our staff and our management for keeping our watershed safe. And we're keeping with the business going because it was really difficult from all levels. Government was struggling with how adapting to a new way of doing business, and we've done it. And I was very happy and proud to be part of that team. And I know that we have a great organization to move forward to keep serving our watershed and protecting our water. So I want to personally thank everyone, and I'm looking forward to stay on the board with the executives and keep doing a good job that we do on our mission. So without further ado, I know that we have remarks and representative from different level of government. The representative today is on with us. I know John has been busy uploading some video from us. So we will go through those videos, and after that we'll do some roll call.
The only thing we might do first, Mr. Chair, might be our approval of the agenda and supplemental, if we might.
Sure. So we can go to number 3, approval of SNC of board directors agenda and supplement agenda. Bill and Pierre, all in favor? Okay. And now we're going to move to the video.
Just a quick declaration of conflict of interest as well.
Do we have any declaration of conflict of interest? Not seeing none.
Sure, we can move to number 5 and we'll roll call after that. That's great.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Hi, bonjour. I'm Francis Droy, Member of Parliament for Glengarry Prescott Russell. I want to welcome you virtually to the South Nation Conservation Authority's Board of Directors Annual General Meeting. And I want to thank the South Nation for 75 years. You have ensured that our watershed is protected. You have ensured that residents are able to build while respecting regulations. Climate change is something that we are all living through, and I believe that your Conservation Authority plays a vital role. I'm glad to see that you have expanded your territory to include Rockland and Alfred Plantagenet. We know that in 2017 and 2019, those two communities were impacted by floods, and I'm glad that you'll be playing a vital role over there. I'm also happy to see that the federal government is playing a role in helping you expand your mapping and your watershed, and I'm looking forward to the study being completed in 2023. In all, you have a lot of work to do, et je tiens à vous remercier pour tout le travail que vous faites. Bon AGA, merci beaucoup, thank you so much.
Good morning. As the proud member of Parliament for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, it's my privilege to bring greetings on behalf of the federal government at your annual general meeting. I want to start by congratulating you on the special milestone of 75 years of conservation and environmental leadership in our region. To all of the board of directors, current and past, and the same with staff and volunteers, your leadership and energy and best practices have made an immense difference to the quality of life, quality of environment, natural environment that we enjoy here at the watershed. Having been a mayor, I know the importance of the work that you do day in and day out as a partner with municipalities, provincial government, and in some cases the federal government as well. Tree planting and some of the opportunities that come up have been a great example of how South Nation's partnered with other levels of government and community groups, get things done and make a difference in local communities like the one South Nation serves. I also want to acknowledge the proud partnership the federal government has had with South Nation in developing the LiDAR mapping. And the opportunity, the technology is amazing of how much it continues to evolve and help our municipalities. That technology, the flyover and the topography mapping, is a tool that I know planning departments and municipalities and different partners use on a near daily basis to make important decisions about the environmental protection, about the quality of developments, and the things that we need to do to continue to have best practices used when it comes to conservation. I'm really proud to serve as a member of Parliament. I'm really proud to be a partner and an ally with South Nation Conservation. So again, to the board, to the staff, to the volunteers, everybody that makes South Nation Conservation tick, congratulations on 75 years. I wish you all the best for not only a successful AGM, but all the projects you have lined up for the year. I know will continue to benefit our region. Congratulations, all the best. I wish you a great meeting today and a great year ahead. Take care.
Good morning. I want to take this opportunity to wish the South Nation Conservation Authority a terrific 75th anniversary, and thank you for your years or decades of service to the public through education, through looking after our water protection in the area, water control. Anyway, a terrific history, and again, congratulations, and looking forward to many more decades of service to the public. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Watson, Mayor of the City of Ottawa. It's my pleasure to congratulate the South Nation Conservation Authority for celebrating its 75th anniversary. What a milestone. The work of the South Nation Conservation Authority has been instrumental in establishing critical floodplain infrastructure, forecasting flood events, and supporting emergency management along the Ottawa River, especially during the historic floods in 2017 and 2019. Thank you to everyone for your continued hard work. You should be very, very proud of your dedication to helping preserve our natural landscape, ensure access to clean groundwater, and more initiatives that directly benefit our community. Congratulations again on 75 years. Hope you can all celebrate this special time and reflect on your significant accomplishments. My thanks to George DeRuse for asking me to do this brief video message. All the best.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to participate in South Nation Conservation's annual general meeting. For 75 years, SNC has a strong history of watershed management and sustainability practices. And today, SNC proudly manages over 4,000 square kilometers of land in partnership with 16 watershed municipalities here in Eastern Ontario, including those in my riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. Our government values your decades of experience in protecting our environment, as well as educating and engaging with local communities. Conservation authorities like SNC play an important role in our local planning and development review process to make sure that developments respect local natural heritage and protect people and property from natural hazards, while also working diligently to ensure projects are assessed in a timely manner. To address the housing supply crisis, our government is working with municipalities, industry, and other authorities like CAs to make it easier and faster to build homes where it makes sense to build. That's why we're investing up to $350 million across the province to help municipalities and the province make their planning and approvals process more efficient and to identify potential savings, to accelerate the creation of new housing and modernize municipal services. I appreciate the many initiatives that SNC has taken to make your approvals more efficient and transparent. For example, over the past few years, SNC has participated in Conservation Ontario's Timely Review Task Force to help improve the speed of project approvals. SNC has also implemented new client service policies to ensure that your processes are clear, that they're transparent, and they're easy to understand to the public. And also, you've implemented new online resources to allow people to apply for permits online and use online mapping tools to view regulated areas. Conservation authorities like SNC are key partners to ensure we are taking a balanced approach to creating homes and jobs in healthy, sustainable communities. And this is vital to our government's ongoing work to build a bright future for all Ontarians and make sure that our beautiful province continues to be the best place to live, work, and prosper. Once again, I want to thank SNC for all the great work you do. I hope you have a productive AGM.
Thank you very much, and it's so nice to hear from the three levels of government and their testament on the work our staff, of course, the board director does, and our partner municipality. I want to thank the 16 municipalities that we've been working with them in a partnership in the last many years, in 75 years that we are celebrating. So far, we had a milestone. I'm looking forward to many other years coming up our way. So it's great to see our partner in the three level of government working with us and our staff day in and day out to work with them and help us throughout grant and help us to be able to do and conduct our business very efficiently. So thank you very much for all the representatives that they gave us the meeting this morning. Without further ado, I'd like to start. Can we have a board director meeting minute? We don't need to approve the board director's meeting.
Still have, I think there's still some PowerPoint left to go, right, Rhonda?
Sorry, 1 second. We're currently frozen. Just need to
Just a little,
turn us off and turn us back.
a tiny bit frozen, but we have a little bit more of a slideshow.
And then we can do the roll call
Absolutely,
before
absolutely.
that. Okay.
We're good.
We're good as though it's going to.
Yeah.
We're unfrozen. Someone advancing it. Oh,
Yeah, John's.
there we go. There's John. John's there in his desk. We see him.
So
John.
Thanks, guys. Hello and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the board, committee, staff, and volunteers that make up South Nation Conservation, we are pleased to present a historical presentation as a brief review of the last 75 years of conservation within the South Nation River watershed in Eastern Ontario. I'll be delivering this presentation this morning with some of our team leads, and we'll share comments on the role our organization has had in improving the natural resources within our region and how by working with our partners, we've been able to create a living natural legacy. I'll be delivering this presentation this morning, and you'll hear later in the meeting from Shannon Gutowski on our 2021 annual report. In this presentation, I'll try and walk you through the last 75 years as best I can. While we certainly won't be able to cover everything when it comes to the work that has been completed in the watershed and the environmental changes of our landscape, we will do our best to highlight as many things as we can, beginning first with the creation of the provincial legislation that enables the formation of conservation authorities. The Conservation Authorities Act was created in 1946 to address conservation-related issues throughout the province and was based on the principles of local government, cost sharing, and an integrated watershed approach to managing natural resources. This act has undergone several reviews and updates during the last two provincial governments, but the mandate of conservation authorities has remained the same: to manage, conserve, and restore natural resources on a watershed scale. The CA Act was formed in part from concerns from the unhealthy state of the province as a result of poor land, water, and forestry practices during the 1930s and 40s. But the Act was also a job creation measure. Governments learned from the economic hardship experienced after World War I, when soldiers returned to Canada and were left without employment opportunities. After the Second World War, governments enacted legislation that could be used for job creation, and it was intended to help put people to work to improve the local environment. The concern for conservation increased through the late 1800s and early 1900s as resources were harvested and communities were built along rivers throughout Eastern Ontario. The combined impacts of drought and deforestation led to extensive soil loss and flooding. Pictured here is the village of Chrysler in 1907, with the streets full of ice that broke up, making spring flooding a regular concern for Chrysler residents. And even without ice jams, spring flooding, which combines snow melt and rain, regularly flooded entire communities, streets, and homes as Mother Nature moved her way from one end of the watershed to the other. Pictured here is a significant flood from the Castro River within the village of Russell in 1938. Like every watershed in Ontario, our landscape is unique. And one of the unique things about our region is that it is incredibly flat. And with a flat landscape comes large floodplains. Spring water was able to spread out and pool over large areas, making it increasingly difficult to travel by any means in the spring. But the impact from natural hazards did not solely result from our flat landscape. The land use changes of the time had much to do with the concern for conservation. While the main economic driver in our region is currently agriculture, forestry was the main driver in the early 1900s. Villages grew around mills constructed along rivers. The rivers were used to transport logs and were used to power mills that were central in many of the communities within our watershed. Wood was the staple of the Canadian trade for much of the 19th century. Fueled by European demand, the timber trade brought investment and immigration to the region, fostered economic development, and transformed the environment far more radically than the earlier exploitations of fish and fur. However, it did encourage exploration, the building of towns and villages, and the opening of municipal roads. Unfortunately, the concept of sustainable harvesting wasn't well formed at the time, and most of the land within the watershed was completely clear cut, and few old growth trees remain. Unlike other areas within the province, there remains, pictured here on this screen is an area that was once called the Bourget Desert. This area once bustled with families who moved to the area as a result of the rail and lumber industry. The towns of Grant and Gagnon in particular were incredibly popular, filled with hotels, schools, stores, post offices, and cheese factories. Unfortunately, though, as the land was cleared, the towns turned into dust bowls. Fields eventually eroded away with the wind, and soil became unfertile, and eventually those towns were abandoned. Deforestation began to contribute to increased and longer droughts, with riverbeds remaining dry throughout the summer. A quote comes to mind from W.H. Porter, the former provincial secretary of Ontario Conservation and Reforestation in 1936, where he was published saying, quote, "Who can forget the exceedingly dry season of 1936? It was pitiful to see cattle going to streams where always there was water. Wells that never went dry failed. The ill effects of drought were intensified by the needless slaughter of trees." Shortly before the establishment of the Conservation Authority, the province of Ontario undertook a study of conservation in Eastern Ontario, which examined these issues, studied the change in forest cover, and identified the links between land and water resources and the need to balance human activities with natural resource management. And while the provincial study was completed in the same year that the Conservation Authorities Act was proclaimed and received royal assent, it was not the environmental science and land use planning recommendations that triggered the formation of the Conservation Authority. Rather, a group of concerned farmers decided to band together to take matters of spring flooding into their own hands. Among their concerns was the continued flooding of their farm fields, which impacted their ability to farm their land. So set on removing the former Nestle's Dam in the village of Chesterville, the threat of dynamite instigated two municipalities to work together and begin the discussion of forming a cooperative organization to manage land and water resources. In light of this tangible threat, the need for the creation of the South Nation River Conservation Authority became a reality. Pictured here is the poster used for the very first public meeting, sponsored by the Dundas County Federation of Agriculture, hosted in Princeton, now within the municipality of South Dundas, where the chief engineer from the province presented findings from a river report survey and discussed the effects of the dam on the control of water. The steps for forming a conservation authority were outlined at the meeting, and the benefits of a watershed management organization was discussed. The former municipalities of Chesterville and Matilda first initiated the request and engaged 28 different former municipalities to form the South Nation Conservation Authority. 22 out of the 28 municipalities whose municipal border fell within the South Nation River watershed voted in favor on February 17, 1947, to create the South Nation River Conservation Authority, our full legal name. Once the vote was passed in February 1947, an order in council was approved by the Lieutenant Governor on May 8, 1947, to officially incorporate the SNRCA. This order remains framed on the wall in the boardroom where some are gathered today. After the formation of the CA, which was the first cooperative undertaking in Eastern Ontario, there was much to do. The first interim report on the South Nation Valley was completed in 1948 and included studies and recommendations on land use planning, water resources, forestry, soils, and physiology within the region. Recommendations included changes to draining to support different crops, introduction and improvement to wetland habitat, farm woodlot management, conservation authorities' role in working with farm agencies to provide soil and water conservation programs. It also encourages the ability to expropriate marginal land from municipalities, offer incentives to create managed forest, and that the authority must work to establish the, quote, South Nation Forest, where the province identified the need for 198,000 acres of land to be established as a working forest, managed by the Conservation Authority to protect and, quote, the natural water storage areas of the watershed and form the basic of a sound forestry policy for the watershed. When it came to the management of water, it was recommended that reservoirs be built in Spencerville, Domville, and Heidemann, and also that a diversion channel be built from the Spencerville Reservoir to the St. Lawrence River, and that several dams be rebuilt and the riverbed regraded. Additionally, the report included pages on wildlife management recommendations, including recommendations on hunting and trapping, limiting the trapping of muskrats, introduction of fish species, and work with farmers. Many of these recommendations were implemented over the last 75 years. Some are revisited over time, and others were replaced with other solutions. And some are yet to be fully studied, funded, or investigated. SNC was one of the first 5 conservation authorities to be established in the province and the first in Eastern Ontario for decades. This map was created in 1950 and shows the names of some former conservation authorities that were later amalgamated to better share, direct, and organize resources. While much of SNC's early work was completed through temporary office and work in community halls, eventually the former Berwick Schoolhouse was selected as the authority's headquarters, along with its first logo, which depicted the white-tailed deer. While we are no longer located in this office, our Works Department office and shop still remains on this site, which is backed by the McIntosh Memorial Park conservation area. This schoolhouse, as some of you might know, is now home to the township of North Stormont. The management of water throughout the area was a big concern, and the issues of flooding were solely experienced in the lower portions of the watershed. In 1968, a report from the province's Commission of Public Works highlighted many concerns of flooding and damage that stemmed from what was then called the South Petite Nation River. The report cited municipal councils as frequent petitioners for, and this is a quote, surveys to be made to devise plans for lessening the evils caused by these periodical inundations. The first serious obstruction was found at the Plantagenet Springs. This pitch off is a ledge of flat limestone rock extending across the river with a dip upstream. This dip forms a natural dam which raises water levels higher than they would have been had the ledge been removed. At this place, during the spring freshet, the rocks would cause accumulation of logs and driftwood, increasing the effect of the natural barrier. The water would then be dammed upstream to such an extent as to overflow for kilometers on both sides of the river and as far back as Moose Creek. Several attempts were made to blast and dredge the river to enlarge the channel and eliminate the flooding. In 1979, a flood reduction study was constructed, and ultimately the Plantagenet Weir was built in 1981 and is managed by SNC to date. This site can be viewed near the Justice Falls Conservation Area. As a result of the historical placement of mills and the establishment of towns, and I suppose the need for flood control projects, SNC undertook many infrastructure projects throughout the years to help manage water levels. Some historical structures were removed or rebuilt, and new control projects were created. From the south in the headwaters of the river to the north where the river empties into the Otter River, you can note the Spencerville Dam, the Chesterville Dam, the Chrysler Dam, the Chrysler Dike, the Russell Weir, the Leitrim Wetland Berm, the Castleman Weir, and the Castleman Dam and Generating Station. The Chesterville Dam remains our largest control structure that was reconstructed, and the only one that needs to be operated throughout the year to help control levels and flows throughout the river and its tributaries. And in mentioning historic mills, nearly every town had one, and they did help shape the rural character of our early communities. They helped harness the power of nature to create power, mill boards, and create food. Unfortunately, only one remains, the Spencerville Mill, first constructed in 1812 by Peleg Spencer, is the last remaining grist mill along the South Nation River that remains in operation to this day. Over the years, the mill was gutted by several fires and experienced several rebuilds and changing of ownership, operating under names like Grow or Bust and producing livestock and poultry feed until it closed in 1972. After the closure, the property was later purchased by South Nation Conservation in 1985 and eventually transferred to the authority's Eastern Valley Heritage Foundation. In 1999, the authority's foundation was renamed the Spencerville Mill Foundation in an effort to focus the foundation's work on the preservation and restoration of this historical landmark and to help turn the mill into a museum and tourist destination. In addition to the water control structure projects, SNC also undertook several river channelization projects with financial support from all levels of government. One of the main or most significant projects took place between Castbridge and Chesterville, where land was purchased to rechannel the river to alleviate flooding in the area. These types of projects are massive undertakings and require significant environmental studies. While important, some of this work may have been prevented had the area along riverbanks been protected with tree cover. Trees are so vital to everything we do, and they can help prevent erosion by holding riverbanks together. In addition to the South Branch project, several channelization projects also occurred in the 80s and 90s. The slide depicts the largest recorded retrogressive landslide in Ontario's history and remains a clear example of why the Conservation Authority works to protect people and property from natural hazards. In June of 1993, this major landslide occurred along the South Nation River between the village of Castleman and the former village of Lemieux. I say former because the CA was instrumental in helping to relocate the entire village of Lemieux between 1989 and 91, just 2 years before this event. Remember the desert we talked about earlier? It spanned a significant landmass throughout the region, and after decades of attempts, the land remained unproductive as a result of wind erosion from deforestation. Back in the early 1900s, up until the 90s, the Department of Lands and Forestry, now the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry, was the forestry powerhouse in Eastern Ontario. And by the 1950s, reforestation was an integral part of SNC's work with the department. Lands and Forestry planted millions of trees and worked closely with municipalities and landowners over this time. With the downsizing of M&R, many of the responsibilities were downloaded to the Conservation Authority, including forest management and tree planting, among others. While the downsizing of M&R also completed in the same era when provincial funding for conservation was reduced to the annual payment received today, it didn't stop SNC from picking up forest management and tree planting roles. Today, we are fortunate to have a number of historical staples within our region: Ferguson Forest Center, the Limerick Forest, and of course the Larose Forest, created as far back as the 1920s, all results of 70 years of hard work and over 10 billion trees, and a forest legacy for years to come. The Larose Forest is named after an Ontario Department of Agriculture employee named Fernand Larose, who had a vision to solve the deforestation problem and spearheaded the planting of Larose Forest, which remains the second largest man-made plantation in southern Ontario. Land was bought by the counties and manually replanted by conservation partners. From the onset, the forest was intended to be harvested resources and a multi-use public land. Today, communities and wildlife are able to access and enjoy this resource, and SNC works with the counties to complete native inventories, restoration projects, and plants trees within this forest every year. The legacy left by these forests is incredibly important, so important that we recently worked with our partner counties to study and map natural heritage throughout the region. In this study, we identified existing core natural areas and mapped their connectivity through the landscape to help identify the desired movement of wildlife from one core area to the next. Not surprising was that many of our remaining areas are large provincially significant wetlands that are connected by the water courses we manage, demonstrating the connectivity of land and water resources. To preserve this important legacy, it's important that we work with all levels of government and the communities within the region to help preserve the connectivity and diversity of these regions. In studying this area, we also looked at public ownership, which will remain the best mechanism to support the conservation of land. This map shows land owned by conservation partners highlighted in light green. It shouldn't be surprising that much of the public land securement has helped create and conserve these core natural areas that are so important for wildlife. It's in these areas that we must secure investments to secure land, restore habitat, and improve biodiversity. The Larose Forest, along with other large forests and wetland blocks, have significant impact on our communities and the environment. And while the study was a recent development, much has been done by SNC to study environmental conditions of the watershed over the last 75 years. SNC completed its first forest cover study with aerial imagery in 2008 and 2014, with results shared publicly in 2016. While much had been done over the last half century to restore forests and wetlands that were deforested, the landscape was once again beginning to change. With urban development pressures and new tools and methods to create productive farmland, the economic driver in the region shifted to agriculture. Because between these study years, it was estimated that over 1 million trees were removed from the landscape each year. And this removal was not based on the sustainable harvest operations that are now established within the SNC and county forest. Rather, we began seeing large-scale clearing that we hadn't seen for nearly half a century. Following these studies, our municipalities directed SNC to work on a forest conservation initiative to engage municipalities, developers, farmers, and environmental and community groups throughout the region. First, with a productive agricultural working group in 2017, followed by a working group with a wide range of stakeholders in 2018. These stakeholders worked together to publish our first report on forest conservation that included a series of recommendations for all levels of government. Recommendations included the emphasis on public land securement and the need for municipalities to continue an acquisition fund, and a further study on natural heritage to better direct municipal tools and stewardship, while also including recommendations for program improvements and stewardship and community engagement. These recommendations have created the popular free tree pickups that are now available in each of our municipalities and funded through fundraising. And program improvements have helped increase funding for tree planting projects, allowing farm fields and water courses, and outreach work, which has helped double the number of trees planted annually by SNC. We continue to plant record numbers of trees thanks to partnerships with individual landowners and the federal government. And often people know us most for our role in the community, planting hundreds of thousands of trees every spring. Thanks to partnerships with government and industries, we've created several successful stewardship programs, like our Woodlot Advisory Service. This program is now exclusively funded by our county partners and allows our forestry staff to offer free advice to woodlot owners, as well as grants to help property owners complete forest management plans. These plans ensure that private forests remain managed for 10 years and offers tax incentives on the management of that land. In addition to monitoring forest and wetland cover throughout the region, SNC completes several provincial water quality programs to analyze the health of surface and groundwater. Our subwatershed monitoring work helps support subwatershed studies that can be completed on behalf of municipalities to inform development reviews and provide land and water conservation recommendations. While much of the monitoring is now completed through continuous and automatic gauges and climate stations, as opposed to the manual collection methods used over the last 75 years, some work continues to require manual collection and analysis. To complete this monitoring, SNC focuses its work in one of the 5 subwatersheds each year and rotates. This allows for the publication of a State of the Nation Watershed Report Card every 5 years, and we will be working on our new report this fall. One of the most important indicators of watershed health is water quality, which is equally important for us to study, along with forest and wetlands. Everything is linked in a natural environment, and changes to forest and wetland cover and activities that occur on the landscape can have an impact on drinking water. One of the main indicators in studying water quality is total phosphorus. Phosphorus is a nutrient that's important for crop production and plant growth, but can have detrimental impacts on fisheries. Total phosphorus does not have human health impacts, but higher levels can lead to water quality issues and abundance of algae and lower oxygen levels, which will impact fish and other aquatic life. And to be honest, this is an indicator that we've paid close attention to over the years, as this watershed does have exceedingly high levels of phosphorus. And it's the reason that we run a provincially legislated total phosphorus credit trading program, and initiatives like the Clean Water Program were implemented to help reduce phosphorus runoff from farms to help improve water quality. These programs rely on years of regular data to inform trends. While surface water remains poor within the region and requires improvement, we have seen gradual reductions in total phosphorus due to the improvements to the way wastewater is treated and improvements to best management practices on private property, thanks to programs like the SNC Clean Water Program and the administration of the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program. In addition to monitoring surface and groundwater quality, SNC has been involved in municipal drinking water source protection since the Clean Water Act was established in 2006. This act was established after the terrible tragedy in Walkerton, where the underground drinking water supply was contaminated as a result of improper treatment of the drinking water after a heavy rainfall in late April, early May of 2000 that had drawn E. coli bacteria from the manure of a nearby cattle field into the shallow aquifer of a nearby municipal well. The contamination resulted in more than 2,000 people falling sick with gastroenteritis and 6 deaths. The Clean Water Act enabled municipalities to work together on a watershed scale to study and investigate potential drinking water threats and to protect drinking water at its source. Once SNC completed the necessary studies to understand how long it would take for different contaminants to enter drinking water intakes, the work began to understand which activities on the ground could impact drinking water supplies. Working with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority and our Source Protection Committee, these representatives worked together over many years to create the Raisin South Nation Source Protection Plan. With support from the province of Ontario, SNC worked with hundreds of private owners to eliminate drinking water risks on their property or to manage them through risk management plan. And now that the implementation phase of this program is complete, all of the rural municipalities within the region have contracted SNC to deliver this act on their behalf and act as their risk management office to ensure that new drinking water sources remain protected. In addition to the rivers being used as a source for drinking water, our rivers are also abundant with life. Ecological monitoring on the South Nation River was sparsely undertaken in the early years of the CA, with much of the historical data coming from the 1948 and 1981 basin development studies. It wasn't until 1996 that SNC began monitoring the health of fisheries within the region. The South Nation River was also home to a commercial fishing operation in the early 1900s, and fish stocking used to occur between 1921 and 1948. And because hunting and fishing are regular activities for many residents, SNC began delivering youth hunts and fish camps to help teach our future environmental leaders the sustainable practices of harvesting from our shared land and water resources. These programs have been funded by partners over the years and are managed through a cost recovery fee-for-service basis. And speaking of conservation areas, the pandemic has continued to teach us about the important access to the natural environment. People all over the world have stepped out of their busy routines to access green spaces as a respite from the ongoing pandemic. Well, SNC began developing conservation areas in the late 1980s, starting first conservation areas in Russell. We only began monitoring visitation through car and trail counters in 2014. Since then, visitation has continued to grow, welcoming neighbors and visitors to step outdoors and into nature. At this point in the presentation, I'd love to pass things over to Sandra and Pat to share some comments on our water and land resource management, and to Rhonda to share some comments on our land and water stewardship.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning. SNC's role in natural hazards management dates to the very beginning and continues to be an integral part of our work. Over the years, we have constructed a number of dams, dikes, berms, and weirs to control the flow of water and to protect people and property from natural hazards. These structures, along with the channelization projects and shoreline improvement projects, have helped shape the watershed we know today. In addition to managing structures, we also continue to map floodplains to understand where water will move on the landscape during storms or flood events. As our expertise and knowledge of the region has improved over time, so has the technology and the tools we use today. From hand-drawn maps to high-quality aerial photography and the collection of millions of points through LiDAR to determine a better topographic. Innovation approaches in floodplain mapping provide solutions in protecting people and property. Using models increase the precision in floodline delineation, create the possibility of delineating lines for multiple events, and provides the opportunity of identifying properties in risk areas. From collecting water depth using staff gauges, which is like a big ruler to measure the water levels, to automatic river gauges and climate stations that transmit data directly into our computer models, a lot has changed over the last 75 years. We now manage a network of climate stations throughout the watershed that provide real-time information into our state-of-the-art watershed model that helps us to predict and forecast flood events and the movement of water through our region. The creation of this model was thanks to the federal government investment in our region that helped us create the first watershed model in North America that uses surface and groundwater data to produce precise forecasts. All the environmental information that we collect over the years is also used along with our floodplain and erosion studies when we are reviewing development applications. Our role through the Conservation Authorities Act and in partnership with our municipalities is to make sure the new development and construction is built away from natural hazards to protect people and property. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Our conservation lands management program. I think these two photos demonstrate effectively the need for land securement. The photo on the left is historical. It's from the 1920s, shows a denuded landscape looking northward into the South Nation River watershed from the St. Lawrence. And the second photo on the right is almost 100 years later in 2018, showing extensive forest clearing that's occurring throughout the watershed. Next slide, please. The SNC Lands Acquisition Program is one of the oldest activities of the authority. We bought our first property in 1960. As you can see in the diagram, there was a lot of activity in the our early history. This is related to our involvement in the Agreement Forest Program. and most of that was directed toward restoring the forest within the watershed. Since the beginning, externally funded land acquisition programs have depended on the support of our local member municipalities. Municipalities continue to play a big role in SNC land securement in a variety of ways, by notifying landowners of SNC land securement program, by reaching out about potential lands being disposed of by the municipality, and providing funding for land securement that, when matched with other available funding, has been instrumental in securing lands in recent years. Our land acquisition follow a land acquisition strategy, which looks at the cost, size, location, existing natural heritage and features, and other factors in decision making. SNC now maintains 176 individual properties comprising nearly 5,000 hectares. Next slide, please. All of SNC conservation lands are managed under the standards of the Forest Stewardship Council to meet economic, environmental, and social benefits. All operations are guided by a 20-year forest management plan and 5-year operating plans. High conservation values are updated annually, and where applicable, operations are modified to protect those values. Forest operations are subject to third-party audits annually. Environmental benefits. The South Nation conservation land base is made up of many different soil types and 51 distinct ecological communities. This provides a healthy and diverse environment. SNC conservation lands include some of the largest contiguous forest areas in Eastern Ontario. There are 64 SNC properties that contribute to core interior forest areas greater than 200 hectares. These forests are healthier, contain greater biodiversity, and support larger and more stable populations of wildlife species, as can be seen in this slide. More than 800 species of plants and animals have been documented, including 13 endangered species, and we are still counting. Our conservation lands are part of our history. The Sugar Shack, one of my favorite photos, reminds me that SNC conservation lands are an important part of our heritage. Many properties contain cultural heritage features, homestead foundations, stone fences, and many more features. As a founding member of the Eastern Ontario First Nations Working Group, SNC has partnered with local First Nations communities to ensure traditional values are protected. Projects that focus on access to resources and medicinal plants, and more recently, SNC land has hosted the Healing Place, a site for building relationship and fostering reconciliation. And if you're looking for a place to relax, breathe fresh air, and enjoy the serenity of the forest, check out the more than 35 kilometers of trail provided on one of our SNC conservation lands.
With more than 80% of Eastern Ontario land in private ownership, empowering and supporting landowner stewardship is critical to maintaining healthy, ecologically functioning watersheds that in turn support healthy communities. The South Nation River Basin Study of 1983 and all subsequent catchment studies and subwatershed plans completed for catchments within our jurisdiction since then have identified landowner stewardship as a key recommendation for improving watershed conditions. South Nation delivers the Clean Water Program, Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program, and the Eastern Ontario Water Resources Program to support landowners and environmental organizations in protecting and improving water quality. The first water quality grant programs emerged in the early 1990s. South Nation's own Clean Water Program began in 1993 to complement the province's Clean Up Rural Beaches program, which launched in 1994. As John mentioned, we do have a water quality trading program. The Total Phosphorus program launched in 2000. It's a water quality trading program, the first of its kind to successfully deliver verifiable phosphorus trading between point and non-point sources. The success and well-established delivery framework of our Clean Water program and the Multi-Stakeholder Clean Water Committee made this initiative possible. What was once a pilot project, an innovative concept, water quality trading is now enshrined in legislation. The Total Phosphorus Management Program continues to be a model for other trading programs across Canada and the United States. The Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program launched in 2000, modeled after South Nation's Clean Water Program. Today, it is delivered by the Mississippi Valley, Rideau Valley, and South Nation Conservation Authorities on behalf of the City of Ottawa. Changes. Okay, John, go ahead. Forest cover loss is an ongoing concern. South Nation works with several municipalities, counties, and partner organizations to promote and support tree planting, woodlot management, and forest conservation. South Nation's tree planting program started in 1990 and continues today. Over its long history, the program has supported the planting of over 3.5 million seedlings. Many landowners would not have planted trees without the cost share support and technical advice provided by South Nation's forestry team as a partner delivery agent for the 50 Million Tree Program. The 50 Million Tree Program provides significant subsidies for planting projects in excess of 500 seedlings. South Nation has a long-standing relationship with local Algonquin and Mohawk communities. Blending Western science and Indigenous traditional knowledge ensures a holistic approach to resource management while respecting culturally significant species, places, and First Nation values. South Nation is the co-founder, co-host, and co-chair of the Eastern Ontario First Nations Working Group. The working group was formed 20 years ago to help meet requirements of the Forest Stewardship Council certification for SNC forests. Since then, it has grown and evolved into a platform for First Nations, South Nation, and other partners to collaborate on forest management and other projects. This ongoing dialogue is an important part of the journey towards reconciliation. Creating ethical spaces for meaning discussion has led to the development of culturally significant, ecologically significant places such as the Healing Place, as Pat mentioned, located in Shanley, Ontario. More than just a planting site or green space, this site acknowledges and celebrates the connection between land and Indigenous culture. It's about stimulating discussion about important conversations. It's about beginning to restore health of the land and the people, language, and relationships. It's about working together to co-create an alternative future. We look forward to continue working together with our First Nation partners to offer opportunities for the public to visit and learn at this space. South Nation works with government, not-for-profits, industry, and private landowners to complete a variety of projects that protect and restore and increase local biodiversity. These partnerships help to protect, restore important natural heritage features while mitigating the effects of climate change. Research projects over the years have brought new and innovative technologies and best management practices to Eastern Ontario. For almost 2 decades, over $1.5 million has been invested in site establishment, research, and knowledge transfer as part of a federal partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, as just one example. Creating local demonstration sites is key to fostering adoption of best management practices and stewardship initiatives. Not only do these sites provide on-the-ground benefits to landowners, they also provide educational opportunities. Many of these sites also serve as outdoor classrooms, supporting local specialist high school major students to gain certification and hands-on experience in their fields, valuable opportunities that will prepare them for their future careers in conservation. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And with the last 75 years under our belts, we've also gone through several branding exercises that have helped us stay connected to our watershed communities. Some may recognize the Old Deer, a popular site across the region, or even the moose, a rarer site, but a keystone animal species that relies on large tracts of forests and access to fresh water, and a species we study when studying natural heritage. Which brings us to our new logos, which feature the white pine, the provincial tree, and the most popular tree that's planted through our tree planting program. In addition to the logos, we've also changed offices through the years, from repurposing first the old schoolhouse in Berwick to the school in Finch, where we find ourselves today. And like in the 1980s, we continue to produce products that highlight our programs and services, which are available to the public, and now in the 21st century, online as well. Throughout the years, our jurisdiction has changed at the request of our municipalities as our programs have evolved and our services have been needed in growing communities in the watershed. Which brings us to the end of our presentation, where I'd like to leave you with a message of a stronger landscape leading to a stronger legacy. Forests, wetlands, and other natural areas support biodiversity and protect communities from the impacts of climate change. And like the environment, we too as people, as partners, are better together. Thank you for taking time to listen to our presentation today as we reflect on the last 75 years of conservation. And with that, I'd like to pass it to Chair DeRuse and General Manager Angela. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and let's give you a big round of applause. Thank you very much for you and your team and taking us down memory lane and it remind us why we need to celebrate our 75th anniversary in the watershed, from protecting our resident watershed, from a quality of the water we drink, from our forests, our ecosystem, and our land and habitat that we protect and serve in the last 75 years. And it's important to recognize all the work that's been done in the past and of course for the future. But also we need to recognize the hard work that our colleague done before us and all the residents and the member of this South Nation from past chairs, past board members, staff, employee, and of course volunteers, and not to forget our land generous landowner that they were a partner with us in our 16 municipality. So thank you very much for the presentation, and it's very important for us to engage and celebrate our 75th anniversary. And we have from now to November 1st to engage and participate. So thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Now I'll pass it to our General Manager, Angela, for
Yeah, I'll do a quick roll call. I have Chair George DeRuse, I have Vice Chair Pierre Leroux, I have Past Chair Bill Smurl, I have Councillor Steve Densham, I have Dana Farkashu, Jerry Couts. Catherine Kitt's online still, or is Catherine? I think she's still online. Regrets from Francois Tamour. We have Councillor Alan Hoogley. We have regrets from John Hunter. We have Councillor Archie Mellon. And we have regrets from Mayor Mario this morning. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That is our roll call.
Thank you, Angela. And we have a recommendation members approved the board directors meeting minutes of March 17, 2022 as submitted. And I will move and second, please. Steve and Jerry, all in favor? Thank you. And that brings us to our item number new business, number 7 and 8, request for approval for the election, and we're asking our general manager Angela to take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first and foremost, the report is included in your package on pages 13 through 17. First thing we required this morning is actually a motion and a mover and a seconder that the board of directors appoint me, Angela Coleman, General Manager, Secretary, Treasurer, to be the acting chair this morning. And that's part of a motion that also reads that SNC's administrative bylaws, all elections are posted in accordance with those procedures for election of officers, and all relevant Conservation Authority Act requirements be adhered to. So we need a mover and a seconder on that one, please. Dana. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I'll go through the procedures so that all board members know what they are. In addition, you will recall that at our meeting of March 2022, we did make a request to the minister's office to have continuation of the current positions. That request was denied by the minister's office, and I did share that with you late yesterday afternoon, thinking that there was still perhaps some chance that that decision might be reversed based on some discussions that we were having. Basically, the minister thought that we would be best to do a re-election, and specific reasons for that are not actually given. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to go through the regular election process and we'll take nominations from the floor. So the Conservation Authorities Act requires that the chair and vice chair are appointed annually. And we do that in accordance with our administrative bylaws that provide that the election of the chair and vice chair shall occur every year at or prior to the annual general meeting, and of course, the annual general meeting being today. As acting chair and in the interest of timeliness and efficiency for this election, I'm going to solicit nominations from board members for the positions of chair and vice chair, one following the other. If I receive only one nomination for each of those respective positions, I will conduct a global motion to approve the chair and vice chair. That will be only if I do not have multiple nominations. If I do receive multiple nominations, I will do respective votes for each of those positions, and I will do those as separate votes. To begin, I'm going to follow the procedures and the election that will work if we have a global motion is as follows. I'm going to declare as of right now all of the positions, those being the positions of chair, vice chair, de facto past chair, as vacant of the current motion under the current administrative bylaws. Now next, and this is right now, I'm going to call 3 times for the election of chair. And again, when there is a nomination for the election of chair, no seconder is required. So first and foremost, I'm going to call for the position of chair. So I'm calling right now as a first call for nominations for the position of chair of SNC's board of directors. Calling once for nominations for the position of chair. I see Jerry Coates.
I would like to nominate Pierre LaRue as chairman.
Okay, so I have one nomination from the floor for the position of chair. And again, no seconder is required for that position. I'm going to ask a second time if there are further nominations for the position of chair. Calling a third and final time for nominations for the position of chair. Hearing none, Mr. LaRue, do you accept the nomination for the position of chair?
I do.
Okay, and I'm going to see if this will be, if we have multiple nominations for the position of vice chair. Calling once for nominations for the position of vice chair of South Nation Conservation Authority. Dana?
Steve Densham.
Dana nominates Steve Densham for the position of vice chair. That is call number 1. Going to call a second time for the nomination of nominations for vice chair. Hearing none, I'm calling a third and final time for the position of vice chair. Okay, seeing none. I'm going to now at this time ask if Mr. Densham, you accept the nomination for the position of vice chair.
I do, thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to close the nominations for the positions of chair and vice chair of the Conservation Authority. Again, the closing of nominations requires a mover and a seconder. So I'm going to call once now to see if I have a mover and a seconder for the positions of chair and vice chair. I'm seeing Jennifer Cashew and seconded by Jerry Kentz. And now I'm going to read the motion. Moved by Jennifer Cashew, seconded by Jerry Kentz, that for the year 2022 and until the annual general meeting of 2023, that Mr. Pierre LaRue be elected as chair of SNC, and that Mr. Steve Densham be elected as vice chair of SNC, and that Mr. George Giroux now becomes the past chair of SNC. And I'm looking for a final. I've got a mover and I've got a seconder. All in favor on that? Opposed, if any? That's carried. All right, and with that, I just want to ask that the chair, vice chair, and past chair may now assume your offices. Congratulations, gentlemen, in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure they'll get us a new one.
Great to business. Great to business. Yeah.
It's always a little nerve-wracking sitting in the big chair, but first off, thank you very much to everyone on the board for the support. After watching the presentation on the work that the Conservation Authority has done for the last
5 years, I think is quite evident. The history and the role I'm stepping into is quite big shoes to fill. So I'd like to thank very much past Chair DeRuse for all the work you've done over the last few years. I know during the pandemic, it was an adjustment that we never saw coming, but you handled it very well. Past Chair Smurl, thank you very much for being on the executive with us for the last few years. Your experience and your wisdom was greatly appreciated by myself and Chair DeRuse, and it was something I look forward to bending your ear on over the next year. To Steve, thank you very much for accepting the position of Vice Chair. I think we'll have a great opportunity for the next year working together and working with the incredible staff we have. So, Steve, if you'd like a moment to say a word.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Chair LaRue. And thank you to past Chair DeRuse and past Chair, Mr. Smurl, who I actually look up to very much as a mentor in terms of, I actually first met him through South Nation, and the way he's conducted business here, it's inspiring. Again, as Chair LaRue said, the last 75 years, it's impressive what we've seen happen. And the progress that has been made, not just to the environment, but in terms of technology and staff. Staff is full of amazing professionals who bring a positive spirit to the work that's being done and to our community in general. And I think one of the other things that is probably the most, the best compliment that South Nation can receive is the fact that members of the public actually donate their land under the care of South Nation. And they choose to partner their own personal legacy with the legacy of South Nation. And I think that's a testament to the work that's being done and to the confidence that the public has in the work that South Nation does. So I really look forward to contributing in a meaningful way. And thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll continue along the agenda. I believe 7B is our next item. Moment for Conservation Ontario voting delegates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report is fairly straightforward. It's on page 18. It's the regular housekeeping, which basically requires that we update our information to the voting delegates as they've been newly elected for the Conservation Ontario Council. So report is on 18 and recommendation on 18 as well.
Okay, so the recommendation, the Board of Directors appoint Andrew Cole.
It's okay. I'll read it to you first. I'll give you a bio first one.
Okay.
That the Board of Directors appoints the SNC Chair as the Conservation Ontario voting delegate for South Nation Conservation, with SNC's Vice Chair as alternate and General Manager, Secretary, Treasurer as second alternate.
So I need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Archie, seconded by Mr. Smurl. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Next item is item C, which is request for approval 2021 year-end audited financial statement and auditor audit letters. Linda.
Thank you and good morning, Board, and congratulations, Chair LaRue and Vice Chair Densham. So the report starts on page 19 of the board package. And it is my pleasure to go review this report and the financial statements. We also have Scott Hodgins here from Baker Tilly. He will take over and just review the financial statement package in full. So just starting with my report. Starting with the attachments to the report, Appendix A, B, and C. The audited financial statements being Appendix A, the auditing reporting letter, Appendix B, and the SNC letter of representation, Appendix C. And that SNC letter of representation is SNC just confirming all the things that are stated and laid out in that letter, confirming that we have provided all the necessary records and access to the information. We actually used Teams and shared a lot of our documentation through a Teams portal with the auditor and with the finance team, which worked really well. Starting with the reserve funds, funds are transferred to and from reserves to meet budget provision, to set up specific reserves for future use, bring back into operations previous amounts set aside for certain purposes, and or meet our, of course, our organizational requirements and obligations. On page, I guess it would be 20, would be the 2021 reserve summary. This year, you'll note on page 5 of the statement of operations, the net surplus being $684,336. And the summary, what it does, it just reconciles that to what we're going to transfer to the reserve. So by deducting all things capital assets, the things that are noted on page 5, you will see that we did have a large investment in capital assets. And the reason we're deducting those, they're not reported on the statement of operations, but we also, all of the revenue related to purchasing those assets are on the statement. So revenue is operating, the capital is not. So deducting that off, adding back the depreciation, and of course, in previous years, we've always had a prior year surplus, adding that back and then transferring everything through to the reserves that are noted on page 20. Transfer to operating reserve, transfer to the stabilization reserve, and a transfer to the capital reserve, bringing us to a zero surplus for 2021. So we're not carrying forward a surplus for the 2022 budget. So just noting the stabilization reserve, you may recall that we discussed this at the December board meeting, where staff were to set up a specific reserve for future stabilization requirements. And that reserve will assist in mitigating future reduced revenues or unforeseen expenditure pressures that we may see in the future. Also, the capital reserve, we discussed increasing that capital reserve by approximately $163,000 in 2021. And this will assist us with our future asset management needs. And this was a concern raised by the board during the levy deliberations. So in short, the transfer to reserve amounts to an increase of $466,149. And this is due to the 2021 surplus not being carried forward into the 2022, as mentioned previously. We also have the hazard tree removal project completed in early 2022. So part of that 466,000 is that carry forward of that amount to complete that project. And the final, month or two of 2021, our busy permitting program, the approvals area of our operations, just generating increased year-end revenue. The surplus itself over the full 2021, as mentioned, $466,000, laying out all the things that we transferred to reserve, as indicated on page 21. The surplus attributed to successful fundraising. I have to say that working for an organization that we really go after the funds to support our current programming, and the big one being the NDNP funding, which was a good part of the driving of the surplus. Our staff do that work for our partners. And also the busy development activity just continued in 2021. We also had some cost savings when it came to the continuation of the pandemic. In the budget of 2021, we had a mixture of still doing Teams meetings, not in-person meetings, and thinking in 2021 that we may come back to a more in-person, and that didn't really roll out exactly like that. Lots of folks still attended their training sessions, and all of that related to board meetings, committee meetings, and training were virtual. And just to touch on in the audit reporting letter, there was a control error, internal control. And this was due to an expense cutoff issue. And so I reviewed this error with the team leads, and the cost of this expense was under $20,000. There was no impact to our bottom line, as the expense was 100% funded by partner revenue. And the partner was well aware of this project, and it was continuing through 2021 and completed later in 2021. The value of the error noted above, it didn't require restatement of the 2020 actuals due to the value. And the next steps, definitely going to have a sit down and choose to review our internal procedures and the tools that we have, and look at are there things that we can improve on those internal procedures when it comes to cutoffs and understanding the active planner tool that produces all our financials, that all project leads and team leads are brought up to speed on that. So with that, if there are any questions for me specifically, I'll turn it over to Scott, and he will continue with the review of the financial statements in the audit reporting letter.
Thank you very much, Linda. I think the board is quite aware that errors do happen in life, but I think it's how we react to those errors that show the leadership of the organization, and the fact that you're going to review internal policies and try and learn from that, I think is a testament to the team. So any questions for Linda? Archie?
Yeah, if you will, Mr. Chair, the amount of $107,052 for the hazard tree removal, that was budgeted in the 2022 budget, was it not?
That was a project that was approved by the board, I believe, in October or November 2021. And it was a needed hazard tree removal project that we were using our 2021 surplus to undertake and complete in 2021.
I think actually it was budgeted at 70, and then it came in, the quotes came in well over 200, like, you know what I mean? It was budgeted at 70.
So there was no money actually budgeted for the extra work if there was a surplus at work?
That's right, we allocated.
Okay, thank you. That's just want to confirm that.
Perfect. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Linda. Good day, sir.
Morning. So I'm here today to present the draft audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2021. On page 1, you'll find management's responsibility for financial reporting. This outlines management's responsibility, which includes maintaining a system of internal controls and performing monitoring and evaluation of these controls. It also outlines the fact that the board of directors is responsible for ensuring that management fulfills these responsibilities. On page 2, you have our Baker Tilly's report to you. This is our audit opinion. So in the second paragraph, you'll find that this is an unqualified audit opinion, which is otherwise known as a clean opinion. Basis for opinion was conducted using the same audit standards in the previous year. The last 2 paragraphs on that page outline management's responsibility, which reiterates what was said on the previous report. Page 3 outlines our responsibilities as the auditor, which includes identifying and assessing risk of material misstatement, obtaining and understanding the internal controls, and evaluating the appropriateness of the accounting policies. Page 4 is the statement of financial position. Cash increased in the year by $871,000 from $2.8 million to $3.7 million. Accounts receivable decreased slightly, but is relatively steady. Receivable from the municipalities represents the long-term loans, and the $57,000 decrease in that account is principal repayment as scheduled. Under liabilities, we have an $18,000 reduction over the prior year, which is basically steady. And on the deferred revenue side, we have an increase of $477,000 from $1.2 million to $1.7 million. I will discuss the cause of this variance in a note later in this presentation. For non-financial assets, we have an increase of $455,000 in the tangible capital assets. This includes additions of land of 546,000, 61,000 in vehicles, and $124,000 in equipment. Assets under construction is minor, and prepaid expenditures decreased in the year by 22,000, mostly related to a prepayment for the tree program in the prior year. Page 6 summarizes the statement of changes in net financial assets. This is summarizes changes in the accounts on the prior page, the statement of position. Page 6 is the statement of continuity of reserves, which Linda has already summarized in her report before. Page 7 is the statement of operations. Revenue increased by $913,000 over the prior year, mostly driven by an increase in fundraising, permitting, and other all these items that are found in other sources, which did increase by $452,000 over prior year level of $1.2 million. For expenses, resource management decreased by $51,000 or 3.4% over the prior year. Property and approvals increased by $338,000 or 12%. Corporate and community services was steady with a minor decrease of $7,000. So overall, $684,336 of net surplus, with an accumulated surplus of $13,964,363. Page 8 is your statement of cash flows. In summary here, of the $1.6 million in cash generated by the operation activities of the authority, $757,000 was reinvested in capital assets, leaving $871,000 of new cash generated in the year. Starting on page 9 are the notes to the financial statements. I'll only read relevant areas here. On page 10, under the capital asset, tangible capital asset policy, you'll see there's a slight change to the capital asset policy, mostly related to the flood control structures, if I'm not mistaken, of $10,000 limit there. Starting on page 13, we just have the deferred revenue. As mentioned earlier, there was an increase in this account. Driving that mostly is $239,074. This is a receipt of, that's under the corporate and community services section. That represents 2022 municipal levies that were received in 2021. Page 14 are tangible capital assets in detail. If we move to page 18, these are the schedules of the expenses previously mentioned on the statement of operations. These schedules agree to that statement and summarize that $51,000 in resource management decrease, mostly driven by a decrease in salaries and employee benefits allocated to this area. Property and approvals is on page 19 with an increase of $338,000, also driven by an increase in salaries and employee benefits, mostly a reallocation of resources. And lastly, page 20 is corporate and community services, as previously mentioned, was steady year over year. That concludes the presentation of the financial statements. I'll now briefly, you want to break here or move on to the presentation of the audit reporting letter.
Any questions, members of the board, at this point in time? Not, we'll continue.
Yep, you're in. The next is the audit reporting letter. This is our summary of our findings to you. And for many, many years past, this has been a very benign letter with just stating that everything that we could find, we found nothing. As previously mentioned by Linda, there was one minor control issue, which we have summarized on the second page. I was going to read it verbatim, but given Linda's dug into it, I don't have anything to add. So for the sake of time, we'll move on from that. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Any questions, members of the board, at this point in time? If there's no further questions, I'll read the recommendation. The board of directors approves and files the 2021 draft audited financial statements, audit reporting letter, letter of representation, and signatures by management and chair. And further that the board of directors approved the 2021 reserve transfer of $466,149. And further that the board of directors approved a 2022 transfer from reserve the amount of $107,052 for hazard tree removal project approved and started in 2021 and completed in January 2022. Need a mover and a seconder to put on the floor, please. Moved by Dana, seconded by Steve. Questions, comments? If not, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Next item is request for approval 2021 annual report. John?
All right, I'm going to take this one. Good morning, everybody, and I am pleased to present today the 2021.
Hold on. The volume is not right. The volume is too quiet, so I'm not sure if you can adjust the volume, please.
It's like our headset doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like your headset is not working, Shannon.
Can you hear me okay? We still have an issue.
Yeah.
We're good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that, and good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to speak with you today to present our 2021 annual report. I have it here, just hot off the press, so very thrilled to be to share that with you later on today. So we'll take a look at the annual report through the pages. The first story we see here highlights the importance of Indigenous partnerships through land and water stewardship. We recognize our partnerships over the years and highlight the Healing Place, which is a safe physical space of healing to help restore land, language, and relationships with community members from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous backgrounds. A priority region for waterfowl conservation, South Nation has partnered with Ducks Unlimited Canada to restore wetlands across Eastern Ontario through a 3-year, $375,000 restoration project. We also highlight the successful delivery of our record-breaking virtual education programs. So due to the pandemic, SNC had to pivot, helping students step outside and into nature through educational videos. South Nation delivered 2 virtual field trip projects, the Maple Syrup Education Program, which featured 2 videos for grades 1 to 3 and grades 3 to 6, and the Ottawa and St. Lawrence River virtual field trip for high school students. The videos were tailored to curriculum objectives and reached over 25,000 students within the Ottawa Catholic School Board through a paid partnership. Another 2021 highlight is our partnership with Prescott and Russell and Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry to complete a natural heritage systems study in Eastern Ontario. And we also take a look at the approvals program, which showcases our septic program and provides a summary of development applications processed in 2021. Our conservation areas continued to see record numbers in 2021. Some of our CAs saw significant trail upgrades, and we opened our newest conservation area, Mill Run, in Augusta Township. And we also take a look at land partnerships that support the local economy, including hunting, honey and maple syrup production, trapping, and crop production, as well as we highlight SNC's land securement strategy. And we also took some time to highlight our programs and services through photographs, including our record-breaking tree planting season, water sampling, and tree giveaways, as well as some public enjoyment of our natural spaces. In 2021, South Nation updated its hazard mapping for its jurisdiction along the Ottawa River shoreline within Prescott-Russell and the Bearbrook within the City of Ottawa, with financial support from the federal government and partner municipalities. We recently held a public information session and met with landowners in the Bearbrook area, and we also successfully obtained WUCI funding for 2 projects, the Gate Electrical and the heater update at Chesterville Dam and the Chrysler Dike Assessment. We made significant gains in our tree planting efforts last year, putting a record 230,000 trees in the ground. And that's just to add to the 3 million trees planted since 1990. In 2021, we were pleased to welcome back our popular youth fish camps, which saw more than 100 youth cast a line over 5 camps throughout the summer. We also had a successful wood auction that brought in almost $3,000 to support tree planting initiatives. We issued 500 septic permits to residents across the jurisdiction, marking the most septic permits issued by SNC in 1 year. Another big win for South Nation last year was the expansion of its climate station network to support flood forecasting and warning and low water response. Funding support was provided through the Eastern Ontario Water Resources Program. And lastly, we do feature our budget and our board of directors information on the back page, as well as an updated jurisdictional map. So as I said, we have our annual reports here in both English and French. We'll distribute these throughout the watershed over the course of the year, and it will also be found on our website as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Questions, comments? Steve?
Yeah, just a comment. It's a very good package, and thank you for producing it. It's tempting sometimes for people to think of the Conservation Authority as the provider of services, checking for septic systems and flood forecasting, etc. But I think the document does a really good job connecting the dots between those services and how it positively affects the community. And again, I just want to highlight the fact that throughout the couple of years of COVID, how important some of the conservation areas have been for the mental health of the community. And again, I think this is a good representation of all the efforts that have been done. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Any other questions or comments, members of the board? If not, the recommendation that the board of directors approve the 2021 annual report. And further that, the board of directors direct staff to circulate copies to member municipalities, local MPs and MPPs, conservation authorities, and various stakeholders. Needing mover and a seconder to put it on the floor. George and Jerry, questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. And next item, you know what, actually, let's take a 5-minute break. Stretch our legs a little bit and we'll come back.
Yeah, I think it's time for people to get a stretch. Here's for you. Run that. This is that.
You got to ask here.
It's a good Everybody
Carl, are we good? Still in live broadcast?
Yes, we are.
Good to go.
We're ready.
Perfect. Welcome back, everyone. It was a little bit more than 5 minutes, but we had the honor of a guest pop in, so we had to take a few minutes to say hello. Our next file will be item E, update programs and services inventory listing category 3 municipal agreements. Rhonda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're on page 71 of your agenda package. So this report follows up to a few that we brought you so far this year. You may recall back in February, we did host a municipal information session on for consultation on the programs and services inventory, which was submitted to the province at the end of February this year. As you may recall, there are 3 categories under the new Act amendments, Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3. We brought you Category 2 last month, and this month we're bringing you the Category 3 update. So again, this is for programs and services that conservation authorities deem advisable. They can be funded through self-generated revenue, user fees, government and other agencies, donations, grants, etc. There is a requirement for any municipal funding into these programs to have an apportionment agreement attached to them. South Nation does have a few programs that fall into Category 3, and we've attached for your information to this report the table that came to you that was submitted to the province outlining those programs. They're namely the tree planting program, the clean water program, our land acquisition special levy, and any education or outreach programs that are not full cost recovery, such as our community environmental grants, fish camps, youth hunt, and the municipal free tree giveaways. The tree planting program does have external funding that offsets most of the costs, but there is a requirement for general levy to cover program delivery and reporting, so it brings it into the Category 3. So just as a reminder, as of January 2024, all of the Category 3 programs and services will require municipal agreements with cost apportionment for municipal funding required for program delivery. Our plan for 2022 is to reach out with our standing committee members. So again, we have our 4 standing committees. So have a discussion with those stakeholders to garner their input and public support for the programs that fall under Category 3. Following that, we will meet with municipal staff, and where there's a desire, presentations to municipal council, again, to discuss these programs and services in preparation for agreements for that January 2024 deadline. So that's just a quick update, and I'll let Angela add.
Go ahead, Angela.
I just, sorry, Rhonda, I just wanted to add the information in correspondence today included at page 119. This is a letter that we received from MECP. They're holding a workshop on May 2nd, 2022. They've asked that we share this with our member municipalities to talk about these inventories. I have no information with respect to what they're going to say. Recall though that 36 CAs completed 36 program inventories, and I'm not sure what the meeting on May 2nd will be, but I just want you to know that you're all invited to that. And I hope that we've done a really great job.
Well, it'll be interesting to see that, you know, if they were planning on holding such a meeting, perhaps they should have did it at the beginning of the process, as opposed to having us do all this work and now coming in and trying to.
It certainly creates a little confusion for municipalities that have started to see this, but I am still glad that we did a February 24th, even though it was just a quick meeting with the municipalities to run through this. I'm glad that we did that. Because this way that meeting is not their first point of contact. And so, of course, we'll update it as needed, and we'll discuss it as a board as needed as well. So just to say, the material on 119 is directly related to the programs and services inventory. So just to note that, and to note it's May 2nd if your municipalities and or others which wish to attend that, and also to say we were going into our first council meeting on, I think that was Tuesday of this week. We had a postponement, but we'll be back to any other councils as well that want a meeting. And I think that's probably the most logical thing to come out of May 2nd is if we receive specific feedback, then of course we go out to municipalities and have a meeting to talk about that. But
so far, I think our categorization is well in line, and I was working with a couple other GMs to do this, so I think that we put a good level of detail, and we should be well positioned for our July reporting requirements. So thanks to Rhonda for this, and again, we've identified the programs that we see as coming up in discussion under both category 2 and 3. So we just brought them in as quick work plans to sort of refresh everybody on those.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions, comments, members of the board? Hearing none, the recommendation. Go ahead, Steve.
Just a question, how does, from a funding perspective, how does this differ? How will this differ from how we're operating now?
Okay, so substantively right now, the general levy is not majorly impacted, but for those areas that are identified that we'll have to talk about. And a Coles Notes version will be the land acquisition levy will require, additional ratification and support from the member municipalities. Some of the tree planting stuff may require discussion, as will the clean water program and any sort of education and outreach that's not covered by user fees. So Coles Notes, I was even trying to think if it would be, it's about leaving aside the land acquisition levy, which is already currently done as a quote unquote special levy. It'd be less than $250,000, I think, right now we're looking at.
Okay. And the other piece that I was wondering on this is some of these outreach programs are very effective in the community, and I'm just wondering whether or not they were funded differently such that we were being proactive in actually introducing them, and now they could be potentially no longer supported by municipalities through funding.
I mean, there's some low hanging, some of them have generated goodwill at a fairly good value return on investment. But we just really have to be careful because we can't use, for example, a levy dollar for these things without permission in advance. And that's basically what it amounts to. And like I said, globally, probably less than $250,000. Yeah.
So realistically, unless the municipality is deciding to cut back on the levy they want to give to South Nation, we should be okay.
We should be okay. We do note that there's a little bit of a heavier focus on things like asset management and stuff. So, and just how we fund that is going to be the question. And, politically, we know we can't ask for more than we currently are asking for. I just suspect that they'll want that shaken out a little bit differently in terms of how it carries forward to the asset management and other funding requirements. So not unlike AN and what it does to your own municipal questions about your own municipal finances.
Any other questions? Members of the board? If not, the recommendation the board of directors receive and file the programs and services inventory listing category 3, other programs and services work plan report for the year ending December 31st, 2022. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Dana, seconded by George. Questions, comments? Not, call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ron. Next item, item F, request for approval, Finley Creek Boardwalk Extension Project. John.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report can be found on page 76 and 77 of your agenda package, and I'll be presenting this morning on behalf of Michelle. Our Finley Creek Boardwalk Extension Project was approved for funding from Canada's Community Revitalization Fund for $715,000. The project will extend the Finley Creek Boardwalk by adding an additional 500 meters of boardwalk to create a 1.4 kilometer directionally safe loop boardwalk in the Legion wetland. The extension will cross an area which is part of a pending land donation approved by the board in March of 2022 and is proposed to end on the property acquired by SNC as a property donation in March of 2020, which is adjacent to Finley Creek Drive. The statement of work and updated timeline has been provided to the funder and will form part of the transfer payment agreement required to accept the funding. The required funding match of $250,000 will need to come from SNC and the City of Ottawa, and the report will be brought back to the board to identify any funds that can be provided by the city and how much of the Finley Creek Stewardship Fund will need to be used. The extension project is not included in the 2022 budget, and the Finley Creek Stewardship Fund reserve is currently at $272,000. Boardwalk construction is a main deliverable identified in the letter of intent for the Finley Creek Stewardship Fund. And it is also listed in the Leach and Wetland Management Plan as an important education and outreach resource. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, John. Questions, comments? Archie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we haven't got any, this wasn't budgeted in the 2022 budget. So there's 200 and what was that number? 72,000 and change. If we, my own personal opinion, if we don't have, if South Nation contribution is going to be more than 272,000, I think we really need to look at this closely. You know, if it's, sure there's a funding opportunity there, but I'm sort of a stickler in South Nation or at South Dundas about budgeted items and, you know, when it comes, depending on the cost, you know, we're talking a few dollars is not into the world, but if we're going to be into the, you know, the large portion, then that's my only comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, great comments, Archie. Thank you. To receive the 750,000 in federal funding, we're required to match 25% of the funding. And so to accept the agreement, we're looking to secure $250,000. Part of that may be able to come in kind resources. Obviously, that one lasting pending land transaction has a significant project value, far greater than the matching funds required. The stewardship fund is sitting at 272, so we do have more than enough in the reserve fund. But of course, from the authority's perspective, we're hoping to retain as much funding as we can in that reserve fund to help restore and maintain that wetland over time. And so that is why we will bring a report back identifying how that $250,000 can be secured. And of course, we are hopeful that the city of Ottawa will be able to partner with us on this project.
Very much. Further questions, comments?
I think the short of it, Mr. Chair, is that the current match that we have with the land donation, the current match without doing any additional fundraising is 750. With the donated land will count as part of the match as well. So we wouldn't have to go further into our current budget to make meet the match. You know what I mean? Yeah, we wouldn't need to put additional money.
Right.
Because we currently sit at least, you know, to get to 250, we already have 272, 818 in the reserve that's dedicated to the boardwalk. And then we have an additional, at least the value of the land that's to come from the developers, about 500,000. So even, you know, at a conservative match, we're sitting at 750 on assets versus going into the operating budget of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then we're thinking of having the report back in the next month or two. Is there a projection on that? And secondly, I think it's a worthwhile project and it looks like most of the money is there.
So of course, thank you. And we are hopeful. We're currently engaged in discussions with the city to talk about the necessary studies required to complete this work. And of course, the acquisition as well is pending. We're hopeful that within the next few months, we'll come back to identify how those funds will be used.
Any further questions?
One last further comment. The city has approximately 1.7 sitting in a rural expansion lands, and the Finley Creek development falls within the rural boundaries. So we've had some preliminary discussions with the city as well about existing funds that may be available for the project should it meet the guidelines and objectives that the city had for those funds.
Perfect. Looking forward to the report. So the recommendation, the Board of Directors approves entering into agreement with the Federal Economic Development Agency of Southern Ontario to accept $750,000 towards the Finley Creek Boardwalk Extension Project for work over 2022-23. And further that, the Board of Directors directs staff to bring back the report to a future board meeting outlining the Finley Creek Boardwalk Extension Project 2022-2023 budget and work plan. Need a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Jerry, seconded by Dana. Call for the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Next item G, request for approval, stormwater facility inspection service agreement. Sandra.
Good morning. The report is in pages 78 to 89.
So we were approached by the national municipality to complete inspection and assessment of 4 stormwater management facilities between their jurisdiction. This is part of the new program, Stormwater Facilities Inspection Program that we started this year. The total cost is $25,454 plus tax, and the nation reviewed the quote and accepted. This report is for your approval to move ahead. Attached is the agreement with the nation municipality for your review.
Thank you very much, Sandra. It's 100% cost recovery, so any questions? Comments? No, if not, the board of directors approves entering into a service agreement with the nation municipality to complete stormwater management facility inspections and assessments for approximately $25,454 plus HST. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Bill, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you, Senator. Next item, item H, request for approval, Ontario Woodlot Association Forest Inventory Partnership. Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report is on page 91. The report capitalizes on our investment in LiDAR. LiDAR is a new standard for conducting forest inventories in Ontario. The Ontario Woodlot Association was successful in securing funding from the Centre for Research and Innovation in the Bioeconomy to complete forest inventories across southern Ontario. Since we have LiDAR available, we've been approached first. The partnership would, we would share the LiDAR information with the Ontario Woodlot Association. They would do all the processing to complete the forest inventory, and they would share the results with both SNC and key partners such as CRIBE. There is no direct cost to SNC for doing this work, as it is completely funded, and it would be a very timely and beneficial project for South Nation as we are due to prepare a new 5-year operating plan for the SNC forest and a new forest management plan for the SDG County Forest. And our forest cover mapping is something that we're due to deliver shortly.
Thank you very much, Matt. Questions, comments, members of the board? If not, the recommendation is the board of directors approves entering into a partnership with the Ontario Woodlot Association to develop a LiDAR-derived forest inventory. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Archie, seconded by Jerry. Call for the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Pat. Next one is request for approval, Mintig Healing Lodge. Pat again.
Thank you once again. The report is on page 92. As the board knows, we have a long-standing relationship with our First Nations partners, over 20 years of work with them. Our most recent project was the Healing Place near Shanley. We did have a delegation from the Mintig Healing Lodge group at our March meeting explaining what their intentions were. They are looking for a non-exclusive use of the SNC property for the construction of a Aboriginal lodge house and sweat lodge. We met with the group and looked at several properties and decided our property located just east of the village of Maxville. It's referred to as SNC 55. It's a 250 acre parcel. Their use of the property is minimal. The lodges would fit very well in a landscape that size and not interfere with other uses. They're looking for a 7-year land use permit, which would allow them to put temporary structures and host public events and harvesting of a few trees to accommodate the construction of the lodge. Mitig has been working with the township, looking at fire safe conditions in accordance with the applicable legislation and municipal bylaws. They are prepared to provide us with proof of insurance as part of the permit.
Thank you very much, Pat. Questions, comments, members of the board? George?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Pat, I know that we have a delegation from with the Nikki last meeting, I think. Is that will work with the timeline that they've been really pressing on? Is that something that you're going to accommodate and working with them so that they can accomplish and complete their project?
Yes.
It's very important, Mr. Chair, because I saw them at an event at our Ashford Forest, and they were really expressed that they really from time stuff like they want to see this. So I'm so happy to see this. I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
I should say, Mr. Chair, as well, you know, they have gone through a lot of things, incorporating as a non-for-profit, et cetera. We did explain that, you know, as a corporation, there are requirements that we have, so they have fulfilled all of the requirements, as well as having conversations, proactive conversations with the municipality and the fire chief to make sure that everything is clear. So they've done all the things that I've asked of them, and so I was satisfied with that. And those included, you know, some larger hurdles as well.
Dana?
I understand this will be a healing place. Will be accessible to everybody?
It is accessible to everyone, and they've indicated that if we are interested as an organization, as a board, that they would be happy to take us out to do something like that as well, should we ever have time. Which I said, well, it's an election year, we appreciate it, but it is open, and you know, some of the partners that they have as well, there was a number of good partners, including training that they were proposing with the Ottawa Police Service and others as well. So they had some connections as well for community organizations that were asking for cultural sensitivity and other types of training as well. So there's a lot of good partnerships that they'd identified that seem to be more than a concept. They seem to have well underway these things. But again, it is still it's a not-for-profit, it's a non-profit corporation, and they're happy to have us on to see that as well.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, the recommendation, the Board of Directors issues a 7-year land use permit pursuant to RRO 1990, Regulation 135 to Meeting Healing Lodge Inc. for non-exclusive use of South Nation Conservation Property 55, County Road 22, Max Hill. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Dana, seconded by Archie. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Pat. Next, item J, request for approval, flood and erosion hazard mapping. Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the flood and erosion hazard mapping for the Bearbrook River and its tributaries has been complete, and it was used to delineate the regulation line. So to complete our communications strategy, on March 31st, 2022, South Nation hosted an online public information session on natural hazards, and we presented the maps and in all the Bearbrook and tributaries between the city of Ottawa. The invitations were sent to 275 affected property owners, developers, and various stakeholders. The public notice was published in the Ottawa Citizen and the Ottawa Sun at least 20 business days before the meeting. And the meeting was also promoted in SNC's website and social media, and there was also a press release. The online public meeting was assessed by 67 attendees, and after the meeting was published in the webpage, and it was reviewed again 50 times afterwards. So staff, after this presentation took place, we met individually with landowners that they have interest in discussing their properties. We were contacted by 8 interested property owners, and we met, some were online and others came here to the office, and we met with them in person, and we went through their properties and what the impacts of the new regulation line were. No, we didn't get any feedback that it would make to change our lines. So today I am here to move forward and obtain the approval for the lines. The 100-year flood and erosion lines delineated for the regulation map will be used for the planning and approval processes under the Planning Act and under the Conservation Authorities Act.
Questions for Sandra, comments? Seeing none, the recommendation, the Board of Directors receive and file Bear Brook and tributaries flood and erosion hazard mapping report and associated maps as the best information available to establish flood hazard and regulation limits along the watercourse. And further that, the reports and maps be used by South Nation Conservation's planning and regulations programs and other watershed management activities effective immediately. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by George, seconded by Archie. Call for the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Sandra. Next, we have K update planning activity. James? Eric?
Yes, I speak for James. Good morning, everyone. You'll find that planning activity report on page 95 for your review. As you can see, it continues to be a strong start to the spring building season.
Thank you. Questions, comments? None. The recommendation, the Board of Directors receive and file the planning activity update for March 2022. Mover and seconder, Steve and George. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Next item, item L, update on-site sewage permits issued. Eric?
Thank you. So this month's on-site report for sewage systems is on page 99 for your review. Our septic inspection team issued a total of 45 permits in March, and our SNC septic inspection program is a critical program delivering Part 8 of the building code in support of 13 local municipalities, and this work protects residents and water sources.
Very much. Questions? None. And the recommendation, the Board of Directors receive and file the on-site sewage permits issued update for March 2022. Mover and seconder, please. Moved by George, seconded by Jerry. All those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. M, request for approval permits issued. Eric?
Thank you again. So this month's Section 28 permits issued report is on page 101. And for your review and approval. And these are the permits issued under the Conservation Authorities Act and Ontario Regulation 17006. And these are for development adjacent or in regulated areas, as well as alterations to watercourses.
Very much. Questions? Recommendation reads, the SNC Board of Directors approves permits 40 through 51 issued under Ontario Regulation 170/06 development, interference with wetlands and alterations to shorelines and watercourses. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Dana, seconded by Steve. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposition? Well, if you're going to fill in for reports, those are the ones to do it, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item N, update SNC's 2022 provincial election strategy. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report can be found on page 103 to 112 of your agenda package. Conservation authorities exist under provincial legislation. We deliver some provincially funded programs and are largely funded and governed by member municipalities. Ontario's next provincial election will be on June 2nd, 2022. SNC will work with partner conservation authorities in Conservation Ontario to share information with political parties and candidates on key election priorities and the work that CAs do to protect the environment and engage their local communities. Conservation Ontario has identified the following key messaging: protection against natural hazards, increased financial and technical support for Conservation Authority natural hazard work, safe conservation areas, provincial support for the infrastructure, compliance, and operational needs of conservation areas, resilient natural assets, financial support for the protection, restoration, and rehabilitation of watershed natural assets, enforcement, improvements for the enforcement and defensibility of conservation authorities, And lastly, local science and the investments in Conservation Authority watershed studies and research to improve CA technical capacity and expand partnerships on CA monitoring programs. The Conservation Ontario discussion papers are included on pages 105 to 112 and will be circulated along with a 2-page primer for candidates from Conservation Ontario to the board next week. And should you have any questions on the report, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Questions, members of the board? Now, the recommendation reads, the Board of Directors receive and file SNC strategy for the upcoming 2022 provincial elections. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Dana, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are at section 8. A, financial reports, request for approval, monies received and disbursement register for March 2022. Carl.
Good morning, members of the board. This is the regular housekeeping report where we bring forward all monies received and monies dispersed for the previous month. I'll happily answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Questions, members of the board? Recommendation, the board of directors receive and file the money received report for March 2022, and further that the board approved the disbursement register of $957,673.80 for March 2022. Meeting mover and a seconder, please. Moved by George, seconded by Archie. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Carl. The next item, we are going to the supplemental agenda. 9A, update estimate statement of operations for March 31st, 2022. Linda.
Oh, Carl. Cool this down a little bit. To short Linda. Yeah, so this is our first operating statement for 2022. You'll see this come to the board for the remaining meetings throughout 2022. The senior management team leads and project leads will continue to review all of their estimates when it comes to forecasts as projects get approved by the board, as revenues, fundraising gets approved by the board, and once those projects get up and running, of course, they'll be forecasted. So at this point in time, this first report is just indicating that balanced bottom line. And as indicated, we'll just continue on through the next 10 or so meetings, maybe not 9 meetings left in the year.
Thank you very much, Linda. Questions, comments, members of the board? Seeing here none, recommendation, the board of directors receive and file the estimated statement of operations for the year ending December 31st, 2022, as of March 31st, 2022 update. Move a seconder, please. Moved by Dana, second by Jerry. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Linda. Item 10, correspondence. We made reference to that earlier. Was there any questions on it at this point in time? If not, we could just keep going.
I guess just direction to me. What do I do with this? Do I send it to every mayor? What's your wish?
I would say simply send it to the CAOs.
CAO?
Yeah, send it to the CAOs.
CAO mayor? Okay.
I agree. Well, we send it to the CAOs and we copy the mayors on it.
Sounds like a plan.
Everybody's good with that? As the head nods, yeah, okay, we're good. Item 11, dates of upcoming meetings, third Thursday at 9 a.m. unless indicated otherwise. May 19th, May 16th, July 22nd, August 18th. Do we know of any conflicts at this point in time? Do we need discussion on this? Okay, so we've had these in our calendars for quite some time. Move on to item 12, future motions of the board and or discussions of SNC issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
George, go ahead.
I just want to take a moment to thank you for conducting the meeting. You've done a great job, and we appreciate all the work you've been doing with me to get that excited. But I will take a moment to thank Bill Smurl. He's been my mentor for many years, and in 2015, and he's been on board with me since. He's my mentor. And without him, I couldn't do the job as a chair. Behind the scene, our staff does an amazing job from a clerical perspective and from providing the agenda and everything. But from work perspective, Bill has been amazing, running behind the scene for us, for myself and Vice Chair Pierre at that time. We both have a lot of busy schedule, and we're further than office than anyone. So he's been doing all the legwork for us, for myself when I was chair. I want to thank you very much, and we're very busy doing all the work behind it. This is, we haven't done yet. I think there's still media, so, but I want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. Bill.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I also would like to just say a couple of words of thanks. This is I'm just finishing my 10th year on being with the executive and 12 years on being on the board. And it's been a pleasure, and it's been a learning experience that I will never forget. And it's been just wonderful getting to know the staff, the leadership of the staff, the dedication and the knowledge that they bring forth and the follow through they do. But I also want to say a special thank you to you, the board members, who have really been supportive and positive, and you bring a heck of a lot of knowledge and enthusiasm to the position. And even though we've come to agreement on all items, that doesn't mean we don't debate carefully, have good questions asked, and look for the answers that are necessary. So for the opportunity to serve, I just want to say a special thank you. And George and Pierre have been very complimentary, but I've enjoyed working with them, and anything I have to offer, I'm pleased to so do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we are at adjourn. Oh, Archie. Archie.
Oh, get on there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I brought this up, and I think Pat is still online here, and I brought it up before about some of the ash trees that we have, especially in our watersheds in the nation and in the south branch of the nation. The windstorm last Friday, I guess it was, I noticed a lot of trees, not only from South Nation property, but just along county roads, along township municipality roads. I'm just wondering if maybe we should get maybe a little bit more proactive and maybe work with our, either the counties or the municipalities and the cities to identify some of these trees that, you know, are going to come back, fall down over the roads. And I think we need to be a little more proactive on that. Maybe work with, like I say, work with our partners and, you know, maybe identify that and come to some kind of, I don't know, understanding who's going to be looking after them. Because I noticed just around my land, oh, what a time to get a phone call. Anyways, nobody wants to talk to me except when I'm talking. Anyways, I'm thinking this would be, if we be a little bit more proactive on this. And we identify these things, and I don't know, maybe Pat, you could maybe comment a little bit more on that, if you will. I can throw this phone out the door, it'd be better yet, but anyway, we won't talk about that. Oh, he really needs to talk to me, Pat. Sorry, I'm just going on.
Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I think there is a good opportunity to work with the local road superintendents. I know they meet early in the spring. I'll try and get on the agenda for that, and we can bring a report back in May.
That'd be good, yeah, because I know, and you know, we have some going down in the rivers and whatnot, and I brought this up before, and you know, it's one thing to be coming down in the nation or in the south branch of the nation, but you know, when you see them coming down, because it happens on a weekend, and guess who gets called out? You know, municipalities or townships or the counties, and all of a sudden you got a road half blocked by trees, and I think it's just going to continue to be a bigger problem all along, because there's just so many dead ones out there. Yeah, thank you, Pat, I appreciate that.
Thanks very much for bringing it up, Archie. Bill.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to strongly support what Archie has said. The municipalities, there have been so many trees down, and South Nation has proven its ability to look after their own properties. With example, the Cass Bridge property, they closed it for a couple of days and took out the trees that needed to be out. They've done the same in Oshman. They're working so well in the properties they have, and I think they're the ideal partner for many of these areas. Extra work, but important knowledge they can bring forward.
Thank you very much. So we'll see something coming in the near future.
Sure, we'll bring that. We'll see what we can come up with and see what kind of a resource that it would take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments at this point in time?
Maybe there may be an opportunity if no one runs away too quick generally, and it's been a couple years, but we usually do a little mug shot. This is when you get your photos taken quickly as a board. So
Yes, let's not forget about the picture.
let's not run too quick.
And
Just
the
don't
lunch.
run as fast as you sometimes.
And Pierre made lunch also.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Usually I'm all night doing these things.
Pierre and Angela.
Yeah, it never ends.
Yeah, it never ends, yeah.
With that, I call for the adjournment. It is 11:31 a.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great time.
Well done, Mr. Chair. Peter, here, George. You